As a little aside, you might be interested. I attempted to put into my computer last night what I wanted to say today. And we brought it to Rotary, and I couldn't find a damn thing. It was gone. And Barb just walked in just now, my wife, and said they had found it amongst the garbage. So my notes are on this piece of paper, and they indicate what I think I could set with all the notes anyway, because it's in my mind. But to go back, you probably wonder why I'm in this chair, which is called a transport chair, not a wheelchair, but a transport. As such, it must be moved wherever I go, so Barb has to push me whenever I'm going. I have an electric scooter at home, but we don't bring it out so I do much. Anyway, to go back about 20 years before my first wife died, she was in St. Francis Hospital, and Dr. Kim was a neurologist his offices were here in this hospital. He would take me while I was down there visiting her and run neurology tests on my legs primarily, and found that I had peripheral neuropathy, which is a disease of the nerves, which they really don't have a cure for. Sometime after my wife's death, I continued to have problems. I went to a place in Pittsburgh where they tested my ears, my inner ear, for a balance. And I thought I did this great. I loved the equipment they had, and I learned afterwards that I really should have been slightly sick during the test. I really think I passed it. So the net result was they really didn't think my inner ear was functioning too well either. After a couple of years, Bob and I drove to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, and they ran tests on me, and they said, "Your inner ear doesn't work too well." Big deal. Well, they knew that. And then they also ran tests on my legs. They said, "You have a peripheral neuropathy." A big deal. I knew that too. But they continued on and said, the part of your brain, a cerebellum, which processes all those signals and translates them into signals for the muscles to work on, it's not working too well either. And the doctor looked at me and he said, "Fred, you've got a triple whammy," which that was a big help. He never did give a name to my problem. Anyway, from there I went home, and I used to walk with my hand on whoever was handy, put my hand on their shoulder, and then I graduated from that to a cane, and then from that to a walker, and just this year to this transport chair I've already mentioned. So that's the story of what's the matter with me. I've got no physical pain. You can imagine the mental pain is significant. I get frustrated because I can't really do anything for myself. I must depend on Barb to get me around.
Yes, and remember to swallow.
I'm just doing that. You got I got that from the crew. You must remind me to swallow. My speech therapist said if you just swallow, I have excess saliva and speak very slowly and very articulately. People be able to understand you, and I desperately would like for you to understand what my problem is. That's my physical problem that I've outlined. It's been a long time developing. It's very slow moving. I've had some degree of this for over 20 years. And maybe you should know my mental state during all this time. When I was small, my mother told me in polite society, you never discuss religion or politics. And I consider this a polite society tonight, but I would have to go against her feeling because speaking about my mental state without reference to my God is kind of like a man that's driving a car and without describing the engine. God is my engine that makes this car work.
Take your time, Fred. Swallow. Relax.
Okay, you get a piece of, can you?
Yeah. If you want to back up just a sentence or two and say that again, maybe starting with what your mom told you.
Okay. My mother had told me in polite society, you never speak about religion or politics. And I think that trying to describe my life without reference to God is like trying to describe an automobile without describing the engine. Because it's God, the engine, who makes my life work. I've had many blessings in my life. I will not take the time to enumerate them, but I think perhaps the first that comes to mind is the fact that I did not receive the Purple Heart, which is a medal given for being wounded. I got out of the conflict World War II without any kind of injury.
I'm not sure I'm clear on what you were saying there, Fred.
Okay, I'm going to say it again.
Well, I mean in the sense of what you were meaning by that. You were regretful that you didn't get a Purple Heart?
No, I had a number of blessings in my life. One of which, the first thing I can think of, is the fact that I did not receive a Purple Heart, which would have meant I was wounded. And it's a blessing I was not wounded during my 30 missions. Second one comes to mind. I was trained as a pilot, went overseas, flew my 30 missions, and came home, and was married to my childhood sweetheart, Suzanne Shannon, long before I was age 20. I consider that a blessing because Susie was a real blessing in my life. To move on a little bit beyond that, the next blessing I think of is the fact that I came back to Newcastle. Some of you may not consider that a blessing, but it made a huge change in my life. At one point in my early days, my father had told me, if it would make your life any better, I'd be glad to lie down and die right now. He was visiting me in California, and he died in my arms, really. And my brother, who was still at the newspaper in Newcastle, called and asked if I would consider with Susie moving back to Newcastle and going to work at the news. I had received a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Carnegie Tech and a master's degree in electrical engineering from Caltech in Pasadena. That's why I was in California at the time. I worked for North American Aviation for about 5 years after graduating from Caltech.
Take a swallow.
Anyway, my brother invited me to come back to Newcastle to help him run the Newcastle News, which was a family business that wasn't owned by the Rentzes, but we had a third interest in the paper. It was started by a man by the name of Treadwell, whose grandfather was married to Spencer Tracy, as a kind of an aside. And we did meet Spencer Tracy and had dinner at their house. They had a son, John, who was born deaf, and a daughter named Susie, who never married. But we did meet John. He had trouble speaking, as much trouble as I have, or more, I guess so. I couldn't really understand him. But John knew he was going blind. He used to read your lips when he was deaf. He went blind, so they had to communicate with John by tracing things on his hand, words or letters right there on his hand. We met John's son, Spencer's grandson, was back in Newcastle and visited here. You need to realize that Mrs. Tracy, Spencer's wife, was a Newcastle native, and the house where they were raised is still standing on Highland Avenue. Anyway, to go back to my mental state, it was, I said it was predicated in large part about the blessings which had occurred in my life. I mentioned the service in the military, I mentioned my marriage to Suzanne, and about my coming back to Newcastle, which gave me an opportunity to serve many, many people through the Newcastle News. And I really found out, I believe that was God's purpose in my life and in everybody's life, really, to be concerned about other people. I've been a member of Rotary since 1954. And its motto is service above self. I think that probably sums up what God had in mind for all of us. So I would urge you, as you go home, to each consider the blessings in your life. Perhaps you have more blessings than you think you have had. And the blessings then have resulted in the kind of life I tried to live, and that's one of gratitude. I've received all of these blessings. I should try to help other people receive blessings also, rather by my time, which I have tried to give to various organizations.
How you doing?